It is Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific time, and that only means one thing, that it is Acumatica training class day, and today we're going to be looking at financial budgets. So not project budgets, but financials and creating a financial budget in Acumatica. So we're going to jump right into this session. So we got a bunch of things that we need to get to. So for those that are new, and a repeat for those that have joined us regularly for these sessions, weekly training classes covering different topics are held every week on Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific time for I think 47 weeks of the year. The schedule for these training classes are available at acumaticaengineering.com/Acumatica-training. This is for our clients only. You will not be able to Google this the site, and so obviously since you are here, you've been given the site. But if you have other people that you want feel that would benefit from these training classes, please do share that site with them, and then they can register for the classes that they are looking for. So today we're doing financial budgets in Acumatica. Next week we're doing done some custom features. So we're going to talk about those, and then we have report builder, report creation on the 16th. So that's what we have upcoming for the next 3 weeks. Every class will be recorded and available to you on demand after the class at acumaticaengineering.com/maintenance-classes. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, so please do submit questions using the question box in the meeting section. The meeting that you joined, there's a question box in there. We'll try to answer as many as we have time for. Video with answers will be on our blog for things that we could not answer. So we have more questions than we could have time to answer those. We want to make sure that everyone has an equal chance to get those answers, because there could be something useful in there. And for those that asked that question, we would go back to them directly. So gives an opportunity to ensure that all the questions are answered. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about budgets. So what are budgets? Then we'll talk about simple budgets. And we'll talk about hierarchical budgets or complex budgets. And then, how do you revise a budget? And then looking at financials, budgets versus actuals, and that setup of looking at those on our financial statements. Okay, so let's talk about the basis of budgets in Acumatica. So you need to have a budget type ledger for your companies in order to have budgets. So this ledger allows users to prepare budget-related reports and compare the budgets to each other. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have only one budget. You may have multiple budgets. You can create as many budgets ledgers as you need to post annual budgets of different companies or branches. You can use a single ledger. So it is based on what you post and the financial periods, as well as different companies. So you can all use the same budget ledger to do so. To prepare two different budgets for the same company, branch, and year, you must create a budget ledger for each budget. So this is, some people have a seasonal budget versus, a straight line type of thing, and they want to do a comparison. That is something that can be done. Not many do that, but you could do that. So first thing you do is you prepare a budget, and then once you're happy with it, you release it. Once it's released, the budget amounts are posted to the budget ledger and are available for the reports or for comparisons to the actual figures or other budgets. Note the line in yellow, you cannot enter transactions to the budget ledger. So you can't, this is not a journal transaction that you can make to the budget ledger. It is put through the budget screen, but you can't make any transactions to the budget ledger. Okay, so a lot of the time that we're going to spend today is talking about simple budgets, single level budgets, and then we'll talk about the complex one, which has different branches and different leads to those branches. But let's start off with a simple one. Let's look at it in Acumatica, and we'll take the next step from that. Single level simple budgets are single level lists of budget articles with amounts representing the specific expenses and revenues for a budget year. You add budget articles by using one of the following methods. So you can enter an account slash sub-account pair. So everything that you enter, if you've got sub-accounts turned on, you need an account and a sub-account to put in the budget. So you enter those in manually by typing it in. You import the list of budget articles from an Excel sheet. So load it through there, or you load the sub-account pairs with their amounts from an actual ledger or from another budget ledger. So you'll see a comparison. An account sub-account pair may only be used once in the budget, which makes sense. So it doesn't add things up if you've got multiple lines, that kind of stuff. So let us look at this in Acumatica. So let me log into Acumatica and pull this up. Okay, so logged into my demo box. So financials and budgets. So under budgets, you can see they call budgets. That's what we're going to go into. So I'm going to uncheck this to make it talking about the simple budget. So this is my simple budget. So the first thing we said, we need a ledger. So ledger is set up here under ledgers. So let's go into that. So notice we have an actual ledger with the type actual, and then we have a budget ledger with the type budget. So when we're creating a budget ledger, we want to create one with the type called budget. So if I drill into this, and I want to create a second one. Okay, second budget, and the type that I want to select is budget. Then I'm going to assign it to a company or multiple companies that I want. So notice the currency is in US dollars. Well, that's my home currency in my demo database. So depending on what your currency is and your home currency, you select the currency that you want for your company, the budget that you want for your company based on the currency of your base currency of your company. In Acumatica, you can have multiple base currencies. So it's important that you tie it to the budget should tie to your GL base currency as well. Okay, so just by adding that budget and adding your companies, that will take care of it. So I'm going to get rid of that because I don't want that, but just as an illustration piece of where you go and actually do that. So I'm going to flip back to my to my budget here. So my budget, my branch. Remember we talked a slide before we flipped onto the simple budgets was you can have the same, you can use the same ledger for multiple branches or companies. So in this case here, I've got different companies here. So I have architecture and environmental set up here for my companies and different budgets for different locations as well. So it is by branch. So in this case, I'm applying the budget to this one here. Then I select my budget that I want. So in this case, it's the budget ledger that I want, not the statistical ledger. Once I have that, then I'm going to select the financial year that I want to do my budget for. So let's go to 2022. And this is my budget for 2022. Now, I don't have 2023 set up. As soon as I have 2023 set up in the demo, then I could pull in my 2023 year and put it in. So I have various things that I have in here. So let's not do that. And I want to go and create 2023. So I'm going to go to 2023. Yes, I do. So here I have a blank canvas here. So it's pulled in the accounts based on. So I'm looking at my same branch compared to my actual. So I can go and select and say, oh, um, maybe I want my actual, and then my year is going to be, say, 2020. So I think I have data in there. And so what that does is it brings in what those numbers were, so I can then take this information and create my budget based on that, which is cool. Or I can run that based on, say, last year's budget, 2022. So this is based on my last year's budget. 2020 was probably the one that we probably want. So here's the different years, and I can make those adjustments. So that's somewhat useful for me um, to find things and do comparisons. But I could do this without that comparison as well. So here are my accounts again that I have been using in the past, but it's giving me zeros. So next, I could do this manually and say, okay, this is going to be 2 million, one more zero. Um, Something like that. And then I can come in and say, okay, so this, notice that I have a warning here that it hasn't been distributed. So one thing that we need to have is these are my numbers based on my account and sub account combinations. But now I need to distribute it across the periods. So to distribute it, I can do various things. I could do it manually and distribute it over the period, or I can click on this wonderful button that's called distribute, and then it'll ask me, do I want to do it evenly? Do I want to proportionally to the previous year? So is it going to compare based on what it was in the previous year and do the same proportion? So again, it's very using the same sort of thought process. This is a starting point to allow us to capture it. And then we also have things like, do we want to apply to sub articles for the node? So that means, do we want to run it through for for multiple things, or not, right? So this makes it again easier um, to do things, because in order to release it, the distributed amount and the amount need to um, be done even. So I'm going to just do evenly here and click on OK. And so it does the math and works it out. Um, there'll be some cents difference, and so that's why it's adjusted for those for the periods. Then we can get an even number. This one I'm going to distribute. This one says, so I don't have any comparisons for here um, to do it. So there is nothing previously that I had against the construction, so therefore I can't do it um, to that. But I could bring this in now. And notice now if I do this and I say distribute, proportionally compared to compared values. So now it's going to take based on my compared values, and I click on OK. So the same proportion that I had previously, so this is in budget 2020, it's going to use the same math to take that amount and proportionally put it against it. So makes it, again, easier to put this together. So we could run through this and do it for all the accounts that we need. We can run through this manually, or we can start it off this way and click on the Excel button. That will put it into Excel, allow us to go in and manipulate it the way that we want to. And maybe we have something that we already use to generate this information. So this export Excel gives us the template that we would want the information to go through, including the headers that we want. And once we have it, we come back and load records from the file, which again makes it easier, because a lot of different companies do things very differently, and this gives you that option to be able to use different types of metrics to come up with your budgets in Acumatica. So once you're happy with it, you come back through here. You got to make sure that your things are evenly distributed, because if you're not evenly distributed, you will not be able to release the budget. So I've got this. I've got these numbers here, which is great. So this is the simple view. This is what most people will do in Acumatica to bring in their budgets. Remember, we looked at we talked that there's two types in the agenda. So the simple one, and then we had one that's called the hierarchical budget, or complex budget, multi-level budget. So that's what I'll use, the term multi-level budget. So you can do that. And so you can create a budget tree. And so this is the tree view that we're going to see shortly. So let's flip here and let's look at the slide. So we went over this one here. So let's go here. So multi-level budget allows you to create a budget tree if that's used in your organization to facilitate the preparing of the budget. So with this multi-level budget, different people in your organization would be responsible for different areas. The tree has budget articles that are represented as nodes and leaves in the system. Node is a group of accounts or sub-accounts. So things like departments, groups of revenue or wage expenses, operating expenses, depends on how you group things up. That'll give you your grouping or nodes that different people will be responsible for. Good examples of this would be, you have certain expenses like marketing expenses that someone would be responsible for to put a budget against, because for the marketing and sales and marketing department, which would include travel and different things that we want to do to bring in business. So someone puts in that budget. We want to give that person access to be able to put in that budget without them seeing other stuff. So this is what that will allow it to do. Excuse me. So let's look at that. So the same thing that I have here, I'm going to turn on tree view. So notice when I do that, I have 3 nodes: revenue, purchasing, operating. So I've got 3 different sections. So if I click on revenue accounts, notice that it only gives me my revenue accounts. Now, the same thing that I had before, which is compare to year, all that stuff remains. Distribute, but all that means is that now I'm looking at specific sections. And I have the purchasing side that has these accounts associated with it. So these are the leaves, and on this branch, which is the operating expenses, it has these leaves. So this has been set up to break it down this way. So if we go into preferences, as an administrator, you would have access to creating the budget configuration. Okay, so now that we got it here, notice that we have our 3 things that we see here, 3 nodes, or the branches. There they are. So in configuration, the reason why we can see them there is we have set these up. So we've come in and said, okay, here from my company section, I'm going to have revenue accounts, purchasing, and operating. And then I'm using an account mask and saying, okay, so anything that starts with a 4, regardless of what it has after, if it starts with a 4, that's going to go into the revenue. And it doesn't matter my account, sub-account mask. But I could break it down and say, okay, so I want things based on my sub account or my department, right? Rather than going straight off of the type of expense or revenue, I can have it, okay, so, if I look at here, I have different things. I think the revenue one shows it to me here. So I have construction, electrical, industrial, and so on. So I have different um, sub accounts that I could then say, okay, instead of setting it up by accounts, I'm going to set it up by department. Or it could be, okay, so revenues for this department, someone's going to look after, and revenues for this department, someone else is going to look after. So we could break that out the way that we want and have those set up. Also notice that we have a thing called secured. So the whole point of having something like this is ease of use. So you could set this all up just to make it easier for you to know if it's only you, it's the controller that's going to be taking care of this, or CFO that's going to be putting in the budgets, and you just want it broken up so you know which sections you've done, which sections you haven't, rather than a big long list. You can set that up, but really the use or the use case comes in being able to say, okay, so revenue, I can come in and configure security and give access to certain groups. And so you create restriction groups and allow them to be able to see that. So then based on that restriction group, you allow certain people to have access to it. So these are general groupings here. that I have in my demo box, but you could certainly make this to go, okay, the construction department, or make a specific one revenue, a budget revenue, and then list the people who would have access to it. So then when they come into the budget, that's all they'd be able to see. They wouldn't be able to see anything else, and that's all they'd be responsible for. And taking that. Notice also on here, there's nothing here that says release the budget. That's done somewhere else. So you control who comes in, who does enter the information, and then a final review, make sure everything's good, and then different process to release uh, the budget to the system so that we were able to report against it. So this is where having the tree mode and breaking things up makes it very useful, because then you can also delegate the work amongst the various people rather than managing Excel sheets all over the place to make that work. Okay, so that's my multi-level budget. So hopefully that helps you guys. Already had a question in there. How do you change things when you've entered in a budget? It's as if you're reading my mind. So revising budgets. So what happens? How do you revise budget? So you can correct the budget amounts and add new budget articles anytime. Modify a budget to decrease or decrease spending, reallocate the revenues, include amounts for unexpected or uncommon expenses, correct errors in a released budget. So revising budget is something that you do to a released budget. So while we have it in the mode that we're looking at it on our screen, so right now this hasn't been released. So I can make all the changes I want until I'm happy with it. It's still not out there. The 2023 budget is not available. Once I do release it, then what do I do to make those changes? This is what we're talking about, revising the budgets. So to do that, you're going to go into the same spot that you've gone into and make change. So change the total amounts of the budget articles and the distribution into the period. So it may be that, hey, we distributed it evenly, but that really is skewing things, because we do have, as much as we think we don't have seasonal, we do have seasonal work, and so therefore our budget should follow that seasonal work. And so that's what we want uh, to mimic, so to speak. So in order to do that, we want to make that change, which is fine. So we're smoothing things out, or adjusting it so that it gives us the information that we're looking for. To make that change, we got to go back into our budget, make the change to the individual periods as well as the total, if that needs to be adjusted. So after you've modified a budget article, you must release the article to view these new amounts on the reports. So in order to be able to see it on the report, remember, it needs to be released. We'll come back to rollback, but I just want to take you back to this here. So I've got my budget here for 2 of my lines. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go into release budget. Okay, and so if you see here, you're going to see my financial year, and you're going to see dollar values associated with the various accounts that I've got. So I've applied it to a couple of my accounts. That's it. And so that's what's showing up here. So I'm going to release all. Okay, so that means now I have those 2 items, but then I realized I didn't put in more stuff, and that is really, really wrong. And so if I go to my revenue budget here, I'm trying to put in a couple more lines here. And then so I've highlighted that line, distribute, and do the same with this line. So notice when I did the distribute, I could also apply art on all articles. So rather than doing it line by line, if I've got multiples, I can come back and distribute it across all of them. By doing so, of course, then I'm also fixing things that may have been done evenly. So you got to be careful what you're doing for there. So I'm going to click on save, go back to my release budgets. Boom. So notice all the other ones disappeared. These the changes that I made, that's the one that's going to be showing up that I could release. So it knows what it compares to what's in there compared to what changes I've now made, and allows me to make those changes. I also have this thing called manage budget. So roll back to released value. So I could be making some changes. So if I go to here, for example, and I go, and I'm going to put in, 10 million, or no, that's 100,000. So I'm adding that piece there. So I'm putting a million there, going back to my revenue side, and I'm going to change this to 7 million and distribute that, save that, and then realize I've just messed things up. I've made a whole bunch of changes and I've made a mistake. I can then come back and say roll back. So it will take it back to the last released. So once you release, you're out of luck. But if you're taking the previous one and going, okay, so now I need to make some changes. Oops, I made some I distributed it, but I distributed it across everything in the node. So all my revenue accounts are now distributed based on my previous budget. And I don't want that because I want my sales revenue here to be even, but the rest of them to follow, or different levels. Maybe I've used an Excel sheet, and so now I've messed things up. I can roll that back and take me back to the one that's saved. Once you save, no, you can't go back and say, okay, take me back to the previous one that I did. But it does give you that ability to not mess things up. So that's my rollback. So it's great that we've created our budgets and things like that, but what does that? How does that help us in any way? If we cannot use that in our financials. So the whole reason why we're doing this is to compare actuals versus our budget to see if we're meeting our targets. That's what our budget is. This is what our financial target is. Where are we against a benchmark that we established? Now that benchmark may be, based on best guesses at the start of the year, and we have to make adjustments. So we saw how to adjust that, the ups and downs. But for the most part, that's where we're going to compare it to, so that we can see, okay, this is what we thought. This is where we should be. Hey, we're doing better. We're doing worse on that. So to bring in those two pieces of data together, the actual versus budget, that's where we use the ledger in our financial statements. Now we do have a session later on in the year on creating and adjusting financial statements. So there we could get into really in depth of how to do that. Here, we're not going to get into the in depth of report sets, row sets, column sets, unit sets, what they all do. So that's the course that you want to go into, that one, because that will break it down for you. But here we are going to talk about, okay, so now I have a budget that I've just created. How do I make use of that? And column set is where we're going to make that change and allow you to see those two changes in comparison. So let me hop back into my demo set. And so here I've got a bunch of reports, and these ones all have budget. So profit and loss versus period to date budget versus year to date budget. So I've got a couple here that we're going to look at and be able to see that comparison for it. So I'm just going to start off with this one here. So I'm going to leave the page because I don't want to make the change. There we go. Okay, so profit and loss. I'm going to take it back because my data is more useful if I take it back to this one here. Okay, so period to date. So this is my period to date, and then my budget period to date. So in this case, I'm looking at December 31st. So it's looking at December of 2020 compared to my budget for 2020. And so my budget revenues have exceeded my budget by 250%. So that's very, very nice on my revenue side, but my costs have also gone up. So it's not quite the home run, but that makes sense. Hey, if I've got more sales, then I'm going to have more costs to meet those sales potentially. But notice also that I've got an X amount here in against my budget of zero. So um, it's not ideal. We should have a budget that matches it up. And then we've got our salaries and so on and so forth. So obviously we've where we started and where we thought, and we've obviously brought in a whole bunch of new people and to feed this change of nearly $6 million in revenue. And so we're comparing again against our benchmark. So this is period to date. So December was 2020 was a very good year. So let's go and check year to date. So not quite as good because we had about 250% for December, but still we're talking about over $40 million in revenue difference with a fairly small change in cost of goods as well as operating expenses. So that's pretty good for that. Okay, so so this allows us to compare what our budget is versus what our actuals are, and be able to put that into our financials, right? So which is nice. So let's go back to here. So one thing I did because I was looking at this, so why do I only have a small amount of growth? When I said, well, our COGS is fairly close to our budget, that's actually gross profit. So in order to meet the increase in sales, we had obviously some increase in COGS as well. So here we have $4 million in gross profit, so about 115% increase, and in the end, our net profit is up by 3% over budget. So although we got sales, we got a lot of cost of goods sold here. But again, this is our benchmark, so that's what I want to compare. So before people go, oh no, you got that wrong. Yeah, so I did get that wrong here. So again, this is not a course in creating financials, but just want to show it to you so to be able to see the how that works. So I got my year-to-date budget. So I have a column set. Again, go to that video, check it out. It's on available on demand. Look for financial statements, and you'll be able to learn about that piece if you've forgotten or if you're new to Acumatica. And that probably be one that you want to do if you weren't part of deployment. Stage where we actually go through this class in great detail, that'd be useful. So back to column sets here. I've got two columns. One is my year to date, one is my budget year to date. So the thing that I want to talk and show is for this column, my year to date, I'm using my ledger, and my ledger is my actual ledger. And using my ending balance because it's year to date rather than turnover if it was for a period to date. And for my budget column, I'm using budget. So I'm pulling two different pieces of data, putting them through here, and then I have my percentage difference where I do a calculation where I'm taking my column B, which is my actual, divided by column C, which is my budget to come out with my percentage. And then, of course, I got to put in a formula. If C is equal to 0, then my percentage changes 0. So that's a calculated field, whereas these are coming from GL. That's how I get my financials to look the way that I do. So all the hard work that I've done to build up my tree allows me to go in and make those changes. Very good. So hopefully that helped. So I'm just gonna quickly review here and then see if we've got any more questions, answer those, and then we've got a few minutes left. Let you guys go early, depending on questions for us. So what we did was we discussed what budgets are, reviewed simple budgets, reviewed multi-level budgets, then talked about revising budgets, and thanks to the person who said, hey, put in the question about how do you do that, so we could talk about that, and then reviewed financials, budgets versus actual, and the reporting of that. So let's have a look if got any questions. So the question is, can I have more than just one period showing up on my financials? So let me bring this back here. So we were looking at financials here, and I think this is the question is. So I've got only one period. Can I have multiple periods? So I'm not just looking at one period through. So can I have my budgets versus actual differences for each month? So similar to, say, a rolling 12 month, something like this. So if I've got, let's see if I have any data, good data here. There we go. So this is my rolling 12 months for the period that I have. So this is my January of 2021, and then it goes backwards for 12 months. So yeah, so if I wanted to, I could add in some columns, take this as my structure, add in some columns of here's my actual budget, so then I can see it all in one spot and drill down. Absolutely. So you can add those. You just need to make an adjustment to this column set. Again, useful if you go back to that training class on financial statements. For those that were part of deployment, we had a session on financial statements. was 49. So go back to that kind of stuff that we had. We have some PowerPoints in there as well as video. So re-review those kind of things, and you should be able to um, understand how to add those pieces so you can have it all in one shot, which is, you know, gives you the information by month, and then a difference by month and a difference for the overall for the last 12 months. So hopefully that answers that question. Don't see any more questions. So let's if you're typing some in, continue. I will look again after to do this piece here. Again, weekly training classes covering different topics. Do go to acumaticaengineering.com/acumatica-training and check out our schedule that's been established all the way through to the end of October of 2023. A lot of classes are twice a year, and some are 4 times a year, and then some special sessions as well. Recording of this class will be available to you either tomorrow or first thing on Monday at acumaticaengineering.com/maintenance-classes. Have a quick look, see if there's any questions. No more questions. Do check out our blog, acumaticaengineering.com/blog. And what do we have? So next week, touching on some features that we've created for Acumatica that you may or may not have. So talking about those. And following week is report using a report builder. And then on March 23rd, that is the expected date for the Acumatica 2023 R1 launch. So they'll have Acumatica does a webinar on that. So although this is listing at 11, it's at 10 a.m. piece. We will be putting the link to sign up for that shortly. As soon as we get it, we'll be putting it on there for you to follow. So that class is basically not us talking, but it will be Acumatica, and will be slightly earlier for that. Okay, so that is covers us for the next couple weeks here. So thank you for joining me today. I do appreciate you joining us for these sessions. Look forward to seeing you next week, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the week. Until then, have a good one.